and other Southern Wings webinars after we're done. So it's really nice to have that recording available. You're here to talk about Southern Wings and grassland conservation with a couple of our great friends, Arvin and David, and we're really excited to have you here. Again, please introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't already with your name and affiliation. I'm Deb Hahn. I work for the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. And one of the best parts of my job is coordinating Southern Wings for the U.S. state fish and wildlife agencies. Today is an opportunity to learn more about that program and also to hear from some great conservation professionals and partners working in northern Mexico in the Chihuahuan Desert. We've got Arvin Punjabi from Bird Conservancy of the Rockies and David Bore from Pronator Noreste. So thanks to both of you for joining us today and sharing some great information about your programs and projects. I'll start off with a little bit about Southern Wings and then turn it over to David and then Arvin, but a little background on them. So David is the program director in Pronator Noreste, and he's been working for them for about 8 years, starting within their GIS department and now as program director on focusing on projects in the Chihuahuan Desert. He enjoys mountain bike riding, reading, learning about history, and grilling out. So thank you, David. And we've got Arvind here, who is a senior research scientist from Bird Conservancy of the Rockies in Fort Collins, Colorado in the US, where he works to conserve birds of Western North America through an approach that integrates science, education, and land stewardship. He has spent much of his career developing partnerships, knowledge, and local capacity to advance bird conservation in the in Latin America, and especially in the grasslands in northern Mexico. So we're really delighted and honored to have both of you here. And thanks for those that have joined us and are joining us. And when you get a chance, please introduce yourself with your name and affiliation in the chat. And as I said, we are recording this, and I am going to start off with just a little background about Southern Wings before I turn things over to David. All right, let's see. Okay, does my screen look okay for you all? Yeah, okay, thank you. So Southern Wings is a partnership of the U.S. state fish and wildlife agencies, and we created this partnership in 2009 based on the fact that we will not have successful conservation of our migratory birds if we're not working across their life cycle on the threats that they face throughout the Western Hemisphere. Southern Wings works on habitat conservation, management, and research on stopover sites and on non-breeding sites for shared migratory birds that spend up to 8 months of the year outside of the United States. We know this, this approach works for in the US and Canada and Mexico. We have been doing this for waterfowl conservation for decades, and we have seen that it is a success. Back in 1918, we had the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Then we created the Waterfowl Breeding Population and Habitat Survey within the US and Canada in 1955. We have the North American Wetland Management Plan that was created in 96, followed by the North American Wetland Conservation Act. So we've had unprecedented regional and international conservation, and it has worked, providing tens of millions of dollars and working across the full life cycle for waterfowl conservation in North America. We have brought populations back and we have sustained them. So Southern Wings is based on this approach, and kind of our sister program, Fall Flights, works with partners in the US and Canada for wetland and waterfowl conservation. We currently are in the same place with many of our birds that we were with waterfowl back at the end of the 19th century, where birds are declining at a rapid pace. And we must embrace full life cycle conservation with working in breeding and non-breeding grounds, on habitat, on protection, on management, working with communities and outreach and education. If we're not working throughout their annual life cycle, the US partners, then we're only working on these birds 1/3 of the year. And we know with our grassland birds, these are some of the species that are declining the most of all. Currently, we also have so much more and are gaining so much more data all the time on where and how our birds migrate. We have these amazing maps that highlight species migration from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and the eBird data work. And in particular, when I look at this long-billed curlew map, it strikes me as to all the birds, all the individuals that are in the United States and Canada and move into Mexico for the non-breeding, and what smaller geographic area they are in those areas. And so the importance of working in some of these areas for our shared species is just critical. So to date, we've had 40 states providing over 3.5 million for conservation of shared migratory birds in 11 countries through 24 projects. And I think, sorry, admit someone here. A couple things I'll leave you with on Southern Wings is we try to offer an easy and transparent, flexible process to support the conservation of what we call in the US species of greatest conservation need, but these are really shared migratory birds. So in the US, we can use a host of funding options, whether that's state wildlife grants or Pittman-Robertson license fees. And there are a variety of mechanisms that we can also use to move these resources to our partners south of the United States, whether that's through our regional associations, flyways, US-based NGOs like Bird Conservancy of the Rockies or American Bird Conservancy that are on this call, and other ways. We leverage that money and can provide non-federal match for some important programs in the US. And hopefully at some point we'll be able to do that for Recovering America's Wildlife Act, or RAWA. As you'll see today, we have incredible partners on the ground who are doing work that's just amazing and very effective. And using that data I talked about, we're trying to be strategic about where our conservation actions go. And that effort is allowing us to be more impactful on these bird populations as they move through their full annual cycle. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and just say that's a little bit of an overview on Southern Wings and what that program is. If you haven't had a chance, please introduce yourself with your name and affiliation in the chat. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to David to share his screen and give you a little information on the work that Natura Oeste is doing. It's all yours, David.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you all that are in here for listening this very nice webinar about share the work that we have done in El Tokyo, the birdscape Tokyo in the northern Mexico. So I'm going to start. Okay. Everything looks okay, Deb? Cool. Okay, well, Natura Noreste works in the entire northeast Mexico. So we work across different ecoregions from Sierra Madre Occidental, Chihuahuan Desert, Sierra Madre Oriental, Tamaulipas and shrubland, and the wetland in the coast, that is Laguna Madre mainly, and some works that we have started doing in the rainforest of the southern part of Tamaulipas. So I'm program director in the Chihuahuan Desert, and inside of that ecoregion, we work in these places that cover different types of projects like grassland conservation, river restoration, watershed management, fire management, and also in some places we are starting with social approaches with the landowners and other stakeholders in there, in the sense to transform the spirit of the project from an only ecological to a socio-ecological approach. So the idea is to reach what are the thoughts of the landowners and different stakeholders in the area. No? So in this case, with the support of Southern Wings and ABC, we work mainly in the birdscape El Tokyo that is located in the quadripoint of the states of Coahuila, Nuevo León, San Luis, Potosí, and Zacatecas. And the land tenure of this area is mainly ejido. It's almost the 80% of the land tenure with that condition, and is the place where we can find the Mexican prairie dog. The mainly threats in this area are land use change for intensive agriculture, water pumping from the underground, from the aquifers, also desertification, encroachments due to overgrazing. And one of the mainly contributing factors that trigger these threats are the lack of knowledge of the access to some knowledge of the communities that are living here. In some sociological works that we have made, we have found that a lot of people even didn't know read or write, no? So we have a very interesting lack of social skills in here in the way that people can adopt new methods of how to use their land, no? So they are using the land in the way that the grandfathers used to take advantage of the natural resources in the property. So we need to work with that, no? We need to give them the knowledge of how the best management practice of the land, and also try to diversify the livelihood, because there in this area, if we only focus in, for example, livestock with cattle, is not a very good option for them. So we need to diversify the livelihoods in this area in the way that adopt the community management area. So the priority migratory birds in this area are here, they are listed in here. So we have the wharton sparrow, that is an endemic species in the area, but also we have very good numbers of lumbing curlew. In this area you can see flocks of 3,000 lumbing curlews in the early winter. Also, there is mountain plovers. We have two populations, one that is breeding population, and the other, we have also individuals in the winter. We have very good numbers of Sprague's pippin, and also there is a very important area for golden eagle that, yeah, maybe is not the continental priority species, but here in Mexico is a priority species, a national priority species. So that place in El Tokyo, some places in El Tokyo have been identified as the best habitat for golden eagle in all Mexico. No, so it's a very important area for migratory birds, for all other species as endemic plants, and also for the Mexican prairie dog and all the social knowledge that people knows in that area, no? So ADC and ProNatura have this vision for the birdscape El Tokyo. The idea is to conserve 90% of the grassland, that almost are 238,000 acres, and to restore 50,000 acres. So the goals is to protect, restore, and manage 5,000 acres annually in the next 10 years. In this order, first we need to protect, then we need to restore doing some soil restoration activities, improve vegetation, and then we need to co-work with the landowners to manage that vegetation that grows with the restoration. Also support sustainable landscape based in livestock ranching systems and diversification of the livelihood. This is important because in this area, contrary to other places in the Chihuahuan Desert or the GPCA, here we have two kinds of livestock. We have goat livestock and we have cattle livestock. So we need to work in both, because some ejidos are primarily goat shepherds. So that is a livelihood that have been made in the area for several years. So, and we need to start working in best management practice with goats, and we are doing that with, have developed some guidelines in together with, in collaboration with some university, and we are now implementing these guides with some shepherds in the area. Also promote the design of livestock ranching grassland restoration plans. We are emulating the plans, the social plans, the participate so management plan that MAPIMI have made in the natural protected area of MAPIMI, the Biosphere Reserve. So they design the plans together in collaboration with the landowners. In that way, the landowners can adopt and can empathize with the plan. So the idea is to emulate that kind of planning in together with the communities, so that way they can see how they can, how the opinions of them are in the plan. So because in some experience we have done some plans with different approaches, and we find that people don't feel the plan is from them. No, so we are doing that kind of participative planning. So since 2011 that ProNatura has started working with Southern Winds and ABC, we support the creation of almost 150,000 acres of habitat migratory birds with agreement of protections. Also, we are doing, in recent years, we have done some programs to capacity building and environmental education. So we have done several of these workshop with almost 50 hidatarios, men and women. And in this, with this, we want to give them the knowledge of how they can use Arizona, because is in some kind they think that they can manage the land in the same way that they can, I don't know, the forest in some communities and the flat areas. So with this capacity building workshop and environmental education, the idea is to give them all the tools that they need to manage the land. We also have developed 6 livestock management plan and grassland restoration together with the communities. So right now we are very aware that almost 90% of the management plan are doing in the participative approach. Also, we start with the patrolling activity. So the idea is that the landowners surveillance their own land in a way as a protected areas did with their programs, no? So, and especially in the land, we have done 57 acres of remove invasive species, especially grassrot and onion weed. That onion weed in some ejidos is a very interesting problem with that. Also, we have installing some fencings to protect almost 8,000 acres of habitat of birds. We have done some soil restoration action due to the highest overgrazing rate that some properties has in this area. We need to start we need to stop the erosion process in the beginning. So we did some restoration actions. We also are doing some micro basins that this action have given some good results in MAPIMI area. So we are doing that in some areas in Tokyo, especially in the flat areas below the 6% of slope. So we are replicating that also. So, and we are doing this microbasin in small plots. The idea is that people watch a place, how the grassland can be recovered only with some action, but also with an exclusion. No? So the idea is that landowners watch the process of restoration in very small plots. In that way, they can realize how this can work in a very huge areas. No? Also, we support with some ranching infrastructure with the idea that people adopt best management practice with drinkers, pipelines, and other infrastructure. No? So looking ahead, well, we have a very good challenge in this area, because I forgot to mention there is there is not a huge or a continuous of protection from the government. No, we have scattered natural protected areas. Some are volunteer natural protected areas, another are from state. So we need to start working in a way that allows us how that people realize the importance of the area. So we want to strike environmental education campaigns in a way that people feel that feel that the land is very important for them. So we need to work with the people in a way, for example, in collaboration with the Museo de las Aves or in Saltillo and Museo del Desierto, because those museums have a lot of knowledge and a lot of information in a very public friendly way. So the idea is to go into that museums with children, men, ranchers, women, and the museum gives them that information that they have collected across several years. We have done that in the past and with good results. The landowners also know or see, for example, in the Museo de las Aves, they after all the tour in the museum, they see the birds in a different point of view. No, also we want to start working with other local schools in a way that we can reach more people using the local school as focal points of extensionists, and that the students of the local schools go to the communities and start disseminate all the information about the El Tokyo birdscape. And we want to start a ranching operation in two ranches, in two properties that ProNatura owns, that Loma del Gorrión and Cuatro Gorriones, with the purpose of have a demonstrative site. No, because right now, for example, we don't have a very good demonstrative site in El Tokyo. No, so we want to develop that demonstrative site in these places with the idea that landowners or in local landowners can watch how we manage the land with the livestock, and also with some restoration action like farm management, soil restoration activities, and other stuff, with the idea that they feel that it's a local example. No, because right now we have made some interchange between Mapimi and El Tokyo, but Mapimi is a different area. So we need a local demonstrative site that landowners can visit in a more frequent way, and we can share more about the experience of how livestock can be managed in this area. No, so we want to do it ahead in the next 1 or 2 years. We actually start the re-ranching operation with an agreement of one landowner that we allowed to grazing one little herd in these places with a very good grazing plan and with a very good plan for the future and to grow the operation in this area. No, so for me is all that information that I have. I hope my English was very good. If not, I am putting in the question and answer. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you, David. That was excellent. I really appreciated that information. And your English was excellent, so no worries there. I did have one question. When you mentioned the protected areas, are those a combination of land purchase through Pronatura Noeste and then conservation easements or work with the ejidos that make up those protected areas? Is that?
Well, the protected area we refer as an agreement between a private agreement between the landowner and Pronatura. No, it's not also as a easement. Is more flexible. So, but the idea is that maybe in some future we work together with maybe state governments or federal government to gather all that properties in our huge natural protected area. No, because it's a very important area and is a habitat for many species, not only birds, the prairie dog, endemic plants. So the area accomplish all the values to get as a natural protected area. No, so if we read the definition of natural protected area in the Mexican laws, this place get all the medals to go to be a natural protected area. No? So we are working with that with the state governments and federal government.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I know we're having a Q&A at the end, but we do have a couple more minutes. So Jürgen, if you have a question, you're welcome to ask it now.
Thank you, Deb, and great seeing you again after so many years. Excellent presentation, David. Really interesting, very amazing job that Natura is doing in the region. I have a quick question. With the fencing of the 8,000 acres that you mentioned, that is the exclusion, I suppose it's an exclusion area of any grazing. Do you have an idea of when would you reopen that fence so that grazing takes place? In other words, is there like a habitat structure goal that you are seeking to have to achieve so that then grazing can be made compatible with conservation and the habitat needs of the species in that region?
Well, we don't exclude the cattle from this area because if we put that in the table, the heroes will not going to be agreed to sign any agreement. No, so we signed the agreement of an area of where they are doing the grazing, and then we start working with them in, for example, when we develop the management plan, we invite the ejidos to the field work. So in that way, we explain them, okay, we make the monitoring of the vegetation, and then we explain them that you can see there is no any grasses in here. So the cows are not eating grasses. Your cattle operation is not sustainable with some kind of delicate words. And when they have been involved in the field work, they realize that they are doing not in a very efficient way. No, so they, for example, right now with what ejido we achieve that the ejido sell some cows. So they gather the cows, they tested for the some productive index for the cows, and they will to sell the cows to get out those cows that are not productive, so that they reduce the cow the charge the livestock of number in the property. So we are doing baby steps in that, but the problem is that in the past they only put some money for maybe fencing, maybe some I don't know, drinkers over there, some soil conservation activity, but they don't do the extensionist process. Okay, for what is this why are we doing this? No, so we are now doing in both directions. So we are supporting ranch infrastructure, soil restoration, temporary jobs, but also explaining why this is important. No, so for example, one goal that we have is that maybe in a couple of years we pay them in the winter to conduct the bird survey. So capacity some local owners, in that way they can do the survey, so they can learn more birds, they can learn more about the vegetation, and that way we can reach more quickly some objectives. No, so for example, that is the case of in MAPIMI. No, for example, it's fantastic that in winter the landowners go with us into the bird winter surveys, and they start thinking about the necessity of the birds, and they think, okay, if the bird needs grass and my cows need grass, so there is a match in there. No, and that is what we want to do. And about the habitat goals, well, the idea is to start with in some ejidos they don't have any grasses, any. We have done the surveys. The idea is to, okay, maybe in the next the idea is to start excluding some areas, but with the purpose maybe in the first 2 years 10% of grass cover, and the next maybe 20%. So the idea is doing things in a very baby steps. That way we are not so aggressive with the landowners, and especially because as I was saying, some people they don't have even to read or write. No, so there is a huge gap of information from what they know and what they most know, about how they can use arid zones.
Great, thank you. Great job.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jürgen.
David. Thank you, Jürgen. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Arvind Punjabi to give us some more information about some other work that Bird Conservancy of the Rockies and their partners are doing in northern Mexico.
All right, I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. Slideshow mode. Okay, well, thanks very much for coming today. And thanks, Deb, for the opportunity to share our work with this important group of supporters. So I'll be talking today about our program called the Sustainable Grazing Network, which is something we started about 10 years ago in northern Mexico. It evolved out of our science work that we were doing at the time to better understand the distribution and habitat use and survival of grassland birds on the wintering grounds. But we recognized at the time that threats were increasing rapidly and we needed to act quickly to try to save the grasslands in the area. So first, I'd like to recognize our important partners. We've worked with a number of partners over the years, and none of this work would be possible without them. In particular, Especies, Sociedad y Habitat, that's called ASHAC for short. They've been helping us this last year in particular as we one of our previous partner organizations no longer is in existence, IMC Vida Silvestre. So they've been stewarding our team of biologists over the last year as they form a new NGO in northern Mexico called EIRH. That stands for, in English, Holistic Evaluation and Restoration of Habitat. And so we look forward to working with them in the coming year and years ahead. A little bit about Bird Conservancy of the Rockies first, in case you're not familiar with who we are. We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization based in Colorado with a mission to conserve birds and their habitats. We do that through science, education, and stewardship. And we work throughout the Rocky Mountains and Great Plains regions, as well as wherever our migratory birds go, including in northern Mexico and beyond. So you may already be aware of the critical importance of the Chihuahuan Desert region to North American grassland birds. But if not, it supports the highest concentration of grassland species in winter. Fully 90% of the migratory Great Plains grassland bird species overwinter in the Chihuahuan Desert. That includes 28 high priority species of birds as identified by various state and federal agencies in the US and Canada, as well as NGOs. Now, as you can see from the map on the left here, the extent of grasslands in the Chihuahuan Desert is quite limited compared to the Great Plains. According to INEGI, the National Institute for Geography and Statistics in Mexico, about 15% of the region is classified as grasslands, and that's about 1/5 the area of grasslands in the Great Plains. But the amount of that grassland area that you see in green in Mexico there, that is actually suitable habitat for a range of grassland bird species is probably somewhere closer to 5% of the region, perhaps even as little as 1%. It's really difficult to get at that level of habitat quality through the current GIS, but much of what is shown as grassland has been heavily encroached by shrubs. Some of it has also been converted to other land uses. So it's really quite a limited habitat, which in some ways is an advantage in that we can focus our efforts in a fairly narrow area. But it also means that the birds are quite threatened with each acre of land that goes under the plow or disappears in some other way. And this area's, the grassland birds here spend up to 8 months of the year living in this region. So although many of these migratory species don't nest there, this area is critical to their survival. As we know, grassland birds that winter in the Chihuahuan Desert have been declining twice as fast as other grassland birds continentally. This was published in a State of the Birds report from 2016 or 17, I believe. But this is due in part to the high threats we see on the wintering grounds. Perhaps most important among them is the ongoing shrub encroachment, which has been affecting the grasslands in the region since roughly the 1860s. So for well over 1.5 centuries, and this is ongoing today. You can see the effects very clearly related to management of lands here along the fence line. You can see shrubs encroached on the left and fairly open grasslands on the right. So this is a direct result of management, and as most people have, most authors who've studied this recognize that it is due to long-term overgrazing of the land is the primary cause. That same driver there can also result in desertification, loss of perennial grass cover and other vegetation, sometimes permanently. And more recently, we are seeing a rapid increase or expansion in croplands, particularly irrigated croplands in northern Mexico. And this is quickly becoming the most urgent threat to address. Yeah, it's consuming quite a bit. Over 200,000 hectares of grassland have been lost since 2005 in just the grassland priority areas of Janos and Valles Centrales in just the last 15 years, so 15, 17 years. Climate change, also an ever-present and increasing threat with severe heat and reduced rainfall in the summertime, which is, of course, what the grasslands depend on. Lastly, there is insufficient conservation capacity in this region. And by that, I mean infrastructure, programs, organizations working to address conservation. There are really relatively few that are actively engaged in grassland management and restoration. Excuse me. So in 2012, we developed a sustainable grazing network, which is a voluntary network of sustainably managed grazing lands that provide habitat for grassland specialist birds through a science-based working lands approach. Our goals are basically to help ranchers improve the resilience of their operations so that they can stay on the land, continue to make a profit, and continue to steward the land. We also aim to engage them more as stewards of the land and become more aware of the other resources that their ranches support, like birds. And then our third goal is to sustain and improve habitat for grassland priority species on these ranches. So the program addresses some of the drivers of habitat degradation and loss, which are primarily the grazing mismanagement or lack of adequate management to sustain grasslands. It also assures near-term protection of the ranches we enroll in the program through a 15-year agreement that prohibits conversion of the grasslands on their lands to other land uses. We employ adaptive management, restoration, and monitoring to inform that. And the program's a win-win for ranchers and birds. I'll talk a little bit more about that. This map here in northern Mexico, northern Chihuahua, principally, you see a little bit of northern Coahuila over to the right, and just a little corner of northeastern Sonora over on the left. We currently have 32 ranches enrolled in the network, covering a little over 560,000 acres of lands in 4 grassland priority conservation areas in these 3 Mexican states. You see, most of our work is centered around the Janos and Valles Centrales grassland priority conservation areas. The gist of the program is we develop a whole ranch management plan for most of the ranches we work with. There are some ranches that already have a solid management of their ranch, so we don't need to develop a management plan. But for most of the ranches, we develop a management plan that includes a grazing plan, identifies objectives for grassland restoration and habitat enhancement. And then we work with the landowners to help implement that plan through technical and cost share assistance. All the while, we take advantage of the opportunities for outreach and engagement to help the landowners become more familiar with some of our objectives as well. And then we conduct annual monitoring and evaluation on these properties. And you can see here on the right is a map of a couple of ranches with their grazing infrastructure mapped out. There's folks on the bottom right here are doing some subsoil aeration. That's one of the treatments we'll talk about in a little bit that we do to help restore grasslands in barren areas, such as the one that they're standing in right now. In total, since 2013, we've completed 20 ranch management plans. We have implemented nearly 2,000 acres of subsoil enhancement, most of that through the technique known as keyline plowing. We've done a small amount of work with gabions to reduce erosion. And we've treated almost 5,000 acres of lands, shrub-infested grasslands by shrub control, mechanical shrub control. We have installed or retrofitted 184 kilometers of wildlife-friendly fencing, installed 10 solar water pumps for shallow groundwater pumping, 73 kilometers of buried water distribution lines, 18 water storage tanks, and installed 87 livestock and wildlife watering troughs across the SGN network. We've also done a number of simple conservation solutions for birds. These are things like installing protective nest cribs for Aplomato falcons. We've put in over 70 of those in the Valles Centrales area principally. We've installed 196 of what we call stock tank escape ladders to prevent accidental drowning of birds. These don't actually, aren't used so much for birds to escape from water tanks, but actually to safely access the water, as evidenced by the remotely sensed cameras that we have installed on some of the tanks there. And we've capped 356 open pipes across these ranches to prevent accidental bird entrapment and death. Just over the last year, we implemented 14 rangeland improvement projects on some of the SGN ranches, 14 different ranches, that is, including solar water pumps, water distribution and storage, such as this 100,000 liter water storage tank, cement water storage tank on the Terrenates Ranch in the Valles Centrales, and also some fencing. In total, these projects impacted 60,000 acres, roughly, of land in total, including almost 37,000 acres of grassland. We also conducted 342 acres of grassland restoration through mechanical shrub control. And you can see that image in the right down below shows a treatment. I think this one is actually from last year, but we have similar treatment as this year. You can see that we have to leave those piles of brush in place. We have to get permits for this work in order to clear the shrubs, but we're not allowed to take any of the material out of there, so we have to leave that in place. A couple images here of some of the treatments we've done. The shrub control site here, this is one of our earlier ones. You can see it doesn't look so pretty 1 year after or immediately thereafter, but within a couple of years, it starts resembling a grassland again. And this is really transformative for the birds. Here's another site on the Plan de Alamo Ranch in the Valles Centrales. This one was treated in 2019. And here in 2021, you can see the grassland is quite opened up and much better habitat for our priority bird species. Mainly, we try to target areas with fairly light shrub encroachment, somewhere in the 10 to 15% cover range. But we have treated some heavier areas as well. This is an example of a keyline plowing site. So you can see With the tractor, they make these narrow furrows in the ground along the contours. And then after the rains come, those contours fill in with moisture and germinate the seed that gets trapped there. And it starts to resemble a grassland again in these areas that were once barren. Here's another area just after treatment and 1 year later. As I mentioned, we do bird and vegetation monitoring on all the ranches. This has been going on since 2014. Here's an example on the right of our previous monitoring design that we implemented through the winter of 2019-2020. We actually just redesigned our monitoring efforts, so I'll show you a little bit of what that looks like. But the data I'll share are from our previous monitoring design. In that year, we implemented almost 620 line transects, 500-meter line transects with distance sampling for birds and vegetation sampling. And our vegetation sampling occurs at 2 scales, a 5-meter radius plot for most cover variables, and then a 50-meter radius plot for shrubs. And these are ocular estimates, so they are sort of a quick and dirty approach. Our new monitoring design looks a little bit different. So again, we are targeting the grasslands on the ranch, but using a grid-based grits sampling design. And we're using the Aneki grasslands layer to target the grasslands on each ranch. We select 5 of the available grids that fall in grasslands. And there are 3 800-meter transects in each of the 1-kilometer grid cells. And we conduct 4 vegetation sampling points along each transect for a total of 16 per grid. And this design here, we've been working with Pro Natura and other organizations in the region who are also monitoring birds to create a standardized monitoring protocol across all of our various properties that we work on. Just a little taste of some of the results. Again, here going through 2020, we do have data from the last 2 years. We're still analyzing the data from this last winter. It should be ready in another month or so. But the last 4 years in particular have been very hard in terms of conditions for the birds. It's been a pretty severe drought in northern Chihuahua. So we're pleased to see that some things were still looking good through 2020, in particular Sprague's pipits. We are seeing both at a slight increase, roughly a 15% per year increase on ranches that are under our co-management. Those are the SGN ranches that have a management plan that we've developed. And the other ranches that I mentioned that already have sound management in place, we compare and contrast our monitoring results with those. So we can see on both types of ranches within the SGN, Sprague's pipits have been increasing. Other birds have been stable, some have been decreasing a little bit. As I mentioned, the drought has had pretty severe impacts. We estimated across the SGN in 2020 that there were about 11,600 Sprague's pipits wintering on these properties. Another example here, again, looking at our ranches under co-management, as well as the reference ranches within the network. Some things that stand out, we had a big jump in chestnut-collared longspurs in 2020 on those co-managed ranches. It was not the same on the reference ranches. It actually dropped, but if you look at the absolute values on the left axis there, you see that the reference ranches within our network tend to have a higher density of most species in general, but in this case, the chestnut-collared longspur. Other birds were slightly increasing, lark bunting on our co-managed ranches. Most other birds sort of holding stable. We estimated in 2020 close to 200,000 wintering chestnut-collared longspurs across the SGN. And just a couple other results, more or less stable trends for brewer sparrows and vesper sparrows, parrot sparrows, a little more variable from year to year, but also holding on despite the severe drought conditions. And this is a bird that requires taller grass conditions in the winter. So some of the first stuff to disappear during a drought. We estimated around 12,500 barred sparrows wintering across the SGN in that year. Since then, we've expanded the SGN and updated our monitoring, so we'll have more information to share on that in coming years. Some of the next steps we have in store for 2022, we plan to expand the SGN by another 20,000 acres of ranch lands. We plan to improve management on at least 40,000 acres total, and restore another 100 acres, likely through shrub control or keyline plowing. We are also starting to take a closer look at evaluating the management practices and the implementation of the management plans on all of our ranches, meeting with the landowners to discuss the plans, see what's working, what's not working, and updating those plans as needed. We are also expanding bird monitoring. Actually, starting this past winter, we began monitoring outside of the SGN ranches in the surrounding grasslands and the GPCAs in order to better understand the role and impact of our work in the SGN network. And we're going to start taking a closer look at our treatments. I showed some pictures of some fairly successful treatments. Not all of them look as good as that. Sometimes weather and climate plays a big role in the success of those. But we also want to look at how we can improve those more. If there's things we could be doing either post treatment or pre-treatment to improve the outcomes on those. One of the things we're most excited about this year is we'll be holding our first Encuentro Ganadero, the meeting of the ranchers in Casas Grandes in Chihuahua in September. And this is going to bring together all of the rancher partners that we work with, as well as other ranchers from the region and other conservation groups from the region that we work with. Sort of bring everybody together, build some excitement and momentum around what we're doing, build new relationships, close ties between organizations and people, and create a community of conservation-minded folks around the grasslands. We'll also be training more biologists, rangeland biologists later this year. And we have several outreach and communications events or plans in the works, both with our rancher partners and conservation partners, as well as with the Mennonite farming community in the area. We've, through our work with IMC Vida Silvestre, in the last couple of years, we developed a Low German pocket guide. If you're familiar with the Mennonite communities in Mexico, they speak Low German. So we developed a grassland bird pocket guide in Low German. And we are planning some outreach events with the Mennonite communities and sharing those to get folks there more aware and interested in the grassland birds. So thanks very much. Want to recognize our diverse funders that couldn't get any of this work done without them. So big thanks to them, including Southern Wings. And if there's time for questions, I'll be happy to take it.
Thank you, Arvin. That was amazing. Just so much going on. I find it really interesting, the similarities of how both of your organizations are working in engaging landowners and managing ranching and soil and conservation and restoration. And some of those photos you shared are just stunning with the difference post and pre and post. Some of that management. So thank you. Yeah, so we have a couple questions, and I'll start with Arvin because I think these were for him, although we have some answers to one of them. There was a question about the typical size of the ranches and how many heads of cattle. Jürgen provided an answer in the chat that their average ranch in Chihuahua is about 20,000 acres with about 1,000 heads of cattle. And then I see David, yeah, similar, same thing, about 300 to 1,000 heads of cattle on around 20,000 acres or 5,000 hectares. Does that sound about right to you too?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I'd say the average ranch size is probably around 20,000 that we work with. Of course, it depends. Depends a lot. We also work with ejidos, which although they tend to be even larger, we we usually work with just one. The ejidos are often, it depends on the ejido, but sometimes they are broken up so that individual people manage a certain parcel. And so that's one of the challenges of working with ejidos in the past has been that there may be 20, 30 people involved in decision-making. But under the model where individual ejidatarios manage certain parcels of land, it makes it a lot more practical to work with them. So those tend to be a little smaller, usually in the 2,000 to 5,000 acre range per ejidatario. But those are also some of the most important lands to work with because they are facing some of the greatest challenges in terms of making ends meet and have some of the fewest resources to upgrade their infrastructure to be able to manage cattle grazing on smaller areas of land. And of course, that's one of the challenges that's been going on for many decades is ranches in Mexico were very large, but with very little infrastructure. So basically the cows were put out to graze and then collected again. But the areas where they would graze were, where the grasslands were and where there was water. And so through some of the new grazing practices that we're trying to promote, we aim to distribute that grazing across other parts of the ranch that might not have been utilized before in order to give those grassland areas more rest.
Okay.
But the number of cattle, yeah, that varies. I think it goes from year to year. Also, there's been some very dry years where people have had to sell many cattle. So.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you one last question. We only have a minute here, so we may need to circle back with our participants, which is fine. But there was a question about the shrub piles. Do you know, do they happen to serve as raptor perches or any evidence that they deter grassland species occupancy? I don't know.
We don't know that for sure yet, but we suspect they may serve both as raptor perches, also certainly as homes to small mammals. So unfortunately, that's something that we just have to deal with for now until we can figure out another solution for those. But still, they're pretty spaced far apart, so there's a lot of land in between, a lot of grassland.
All right. Well, I've got a couple more questions that I'll share with David and Arvind through email so that we can share answers with the folks that ask them after this webinar. But I wanted to just say thank you to both you and thank you for the amazing work you do with the partners and everyone in the Chihuahuan Desert. It's much appreciated and really amazing. And it's interesting to think about, and I'm sure you guys have done it many times, but if you look across the whole Chihuahuan Desert and how all these efforts are going on, right, and how it all adds up. I'm sure this is something you both have thought of, but it was just interesting for me to think of as I was listening to both your presentations.
Yeah, well, David will be coming to our Encuentro Ganadero as well as some other people from Pro Natura and some other organizations. So we're really looking to sum up and add up our individual parts and work more collaboratively together going forward.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think both of you touched a very interesting point that we need to collaborate now because the area is so big and there is a lot of necessity. So we need to be more efficient on the way that we have done because the people that is in charge of the people that is doing land use change is very collaborative between each other. So we need to do that in the same way,
Yeah, well, that sounds amazing. I wish I could be at the Encuentro. Sounds like it'd be pretty wonderful.
We'd love to have you there if you can make it.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe I'll show up.
I'll send you info after this.
Thank you. Well, thank you again to both of you. And I will circle back with these few questions and we'll get those out. And then we'll share the recording, not only with our participants and the two of you, in case you have folks you want to share it with, but also with the broader Southern Wings technical team and across the state Fish and Wildlife agencies here in the US too. So thank you both so much.
Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See you.
Everyone for coming.
Adios. Gracias.
Bye. Good seeing you all.
Likewise, Jürgen.
Take
Yeah,
care.
good to see you, Jürgen.
There.
Bye. See ya.
Bye-bye.